because all Hong Kong, especially those young people of even people of my age or maybe younger, they think that a government without democracy is a bad government or even evil government, and they should have their right to vote. And that's the key issue. But from my perspective, what happened in Hong Kong has something to do with the economic mode. Because Hong Kong, if my memories, it has only 7 million people. But you know that Shanghai has 25 million. So also about more than 80% of the Hong Kong area is not being developed. People are only concentrated on certain area like Wangjiao or Zhonghuan, this kind of place. So I guess it's the most rich guys, Li Jiacheng or these kind of people, they control everything of the daily life. Even the electricity and the water supply, all this kind of thing, they're controlled by these capitalists. So I think they need to have a social redistribution of this kind.
So inequality or like the social disparity in Hong Kong that causes the uprising that's happening right now.
I guess so. That's what they should pay more attention is to this kind of thing. The inequality or this kind of thing, not that much to do with democracy.
So how do you think of the students' demand on democracy?
I can totally understand them because this has something to do with the common value. Because people even of my age, when we grew up, we are educated that we should have democracy. We should have the right to vote. This kind of, and people, white people, for people, of the people. The government, white people, for people, of the people. I can understand their wish to have their vote. I can totally understand them, but I think they have neglected something. They ignore the more important things.
Like what? Give me some examples.
For example, now people, that people in Hong Kong, they live in small rooms. It's just about 20 meters, square meters, 20 or 30 square meters. But Hong Kong still has many places undeveloped. So I guess they should have some laws because, for example, they can develop these places and they can have more like what happened in Singapore. They can have the public of all those people should afford to their living conditions.
Okay, so do you think that economic development should be the main focus for Hong Kong people right now instead of asking for democracy? Yes? Okay. So do you think what you just told me, is this common? Do you often talk about Hong Kong issues with your friends or co-workers or anyone?
No, I don't talk much because it's very sensitive nowadays. When you have talked to your co-workers, sometimes you may think it's not safe if you don't know these people well. You don't know whether if you say something not in accordance with the government says, whether maybe you could even, if he tells somebody else, maybe it's not good for you. I don't know whether you could understand it well.
Okay. So do you think this is a shared...
I do talk to people very close to me and we exchange ideas. But we all have sympathy towards Hong Kong people. But we are also angry about what happened now, nowadays.
Who are you angry with? Are you angry with the Hong Kong people or?
When we talk about Hong Kong people, I mean most of them. The whole is the whole part not. But I'm angry about those the protesters. Some protesters, they nowadays they they block the roads and they even throw the bombs, like this kind of thing. I don't know how to say it. It's gas or it's alcohol. They throw it and somebody are burned and somebody are hit, struck. So I think that's not unreasonable to do that kind of things, and it hasn't not good for them because people think they are mad and they would think all the protesters are bad.
Okay, so you think that the violent moves cast shadows on the protesters?
Yeah.
Okay. But how did you know that there were such violent moves? Where did you get that information from?
That is a good question because most of the times, there's one thing I need to clarify because most of the time people from outside foreign media they would think that what the Chinese government published is not true, it's false, it's unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that most of the times the government what the government published could not be false. It's true. But more importantly is that when something happened, you may have so many voices, but the government only published one voice, which is good for them. So and they have ignored the other voices opposed to them. So that's the problem.
Okay, but earlier you just told me that all the publications have to ally with the Xinhua agency, right? And that's kind of
and CCTV, yeah.
Yes.
We should say what TV says, yeah.
But you also believe that what Xinhua agency is saying is the truth.
Okay, here's the thing. I know what you mean. What I think, because I can see the photos, I can see the videos about nowadays what in Hong Kong, those people they with the black mask and they even their hats so that people could not see their face and they just block the roads. They may attack some people or just throw things from the upper level down, and they have already struck some people. So I think these kind of things they're violent, and the violence can do nothing to. You cannot do violence to have a peace end. That's what I mean.
Okay. Yeah. So you are saying you prefer a peaceful demonstration?
Yeah. Because what they want is democracy, and democracy is also one is democracy, the other is you have to do something not illegal. But what they're doing now is they can protest, that's their rights. But now what they do now is totally illegal. Even in the Western world, people would not agree with what they do.
Okay, thank you very much. To wrap up our interview, my last question would be, what do you think is the best solution? What do you foresee an ideal situation would be?
I've told you that I have strange ideas with several of my close friends, but we are not optimistic towards the future. Because you know that when people go to the square, when they protest, they are not very organized. So they become more and more violent. And the government, because it's in Hong Kong, I can tell you that if these things, the same kind of thing, ever happen in mainland, they will be cracked down. Yeah, but it's in Hong Kong. So the government could not send PLA. You know what's PLA? People's
Liberation Army.
Yeah.
Yes.
They would not send PRA to crack them down. So I don't think.
So you think that the mainland government is?
I don't think there's any possibility for them to have an agreement of this kind of thing. They would just some protesters become more and more violent, and the government they sit there and they could only send the police to do something, but they could not crack them down. So yeah, I don't think there's a very good future.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
For our final layer of interviews, we look for an interviewee from beyond East Asia. Liz is an American who is generally aware of what is going on due to personal and academic ties to the region. Let's hear what Liz feels about the protest.
My name is Liz Rice. I'm a second-year TLO Master of Arts program in the Humanities student. I am from the southwest suburbs of Chicago. I guess my connection with the issue at hand is my dad is from the US, but my mom is from Taiwan, and I've spent a considerable amount of my childhood growing up in Taiwan. And I was recently there more than 2 months ago, but back in July. So I have been following what's going on in Hong Kong since the summer, seeing as like it started around April. I think I started paying attention in June, right before I was going to Taiwan. The reason I really found out was through a website that I use to pass the time, Imager, but often a lot of like news information comes up on it as well. It was not something that I had received information about from my family in Taiwan. We often will share, or not we so much as my aunts and uncles and my mother will share information and news about what's going on in Taiwan specifically, and sometimes in China because I have cousins and an uncle and an aunt who live in Wuhan. So to my understanding, protests started to happen because of an extradition bill that came up that a large amount of the population was not in favor of. And as it slowly played out, from my point of view, it seemed that there was a lot of police brutality occurring against the protesters. Although, like, my news outlets don't necessarily show the violence that potentially protesters created, and like chaos protesters created as well. It's only within, the last few days that I like went back and looked at some of the timelines of events that different media outlets were saying that there were crimes committed on both sides of the issue. But depending on what sources I was looking at, I take some of that with a grain of salt. It is people in power will always make it seem like the oppressed are in the wrong when they're trying to fight for their own rights. For the most part, that many people showing up to protest their government shows to me whether or not I understand all the issues as the people who are living in Hong Kong understand the issues, right? But when you have hundreds of thousands of people showing up to peacefully protest and say, like, we don't agree with what the government is doing, then, like, there is something there to be watched. And, like, there's questions to need to be asked of that government. I always support the questioning and the critiquing of government in that sense. I've read a lot, usually from Western outlets, that there isn't a lot of leadership for, this movement in Hong Kong right now. And I think that's part of the issue of trying to figure out, like, what actually will potentially happen. They've set out some goals, the first being the removal of that extradition bill from even being voted upon in their parliament. But the additional demands that I've seen come out are in reaction to what has happened over the last few months during the different protests as well. So, that's a little bit confusing as the movement is constantly changing what the actual goal is at the end. I think as an American, I'm also watching a variety of different, especially like what happened with the NBA, a variety of different American pop culture icons talk about what's happening in Hong Kong, and sort of this discussion about like economy and power and the want for Chinese money, and how that plays into people's different reactions of either support or protest against the Hong Kong protesters. So when I was in Taiwan this past August, the protests in Hong Kong would come up casually in conversations between my aunts and uncles and my cousins, but it wasn't really the center of our conversations most of the time. I would often see on my cousin and my friends in Taiwan's social media thoughts or posts of support for the Hong Kong protesters, but how it impacts Taiwan's politics for me was almost on more of an umbrella scale, right? Taiwan, at the time I was there, was starting their presidential primaries, and there were a few candidates, one especially, I think for the Kuomintang party, who there was a lot of speculation about if he became president of Taiwan, he would be in touch with President Xi Jinping about sort of bringing Taiwan back as a province of China and not its own nation. So there's like speculation about that, and that is sort of something that I found worrisome because Taiwan already is sort of looked on the world in a weird way. It's sometimes considered part of China and sometimes considered its own nation. It's not part of the UN, but it has its own governing system and its own currency, and that's